Alright, everybody, welcome to the next episode of our Game Dev Roundtable cast, where we discuss major topics with a panel of developers. And we always take questions from the chat as well. I think this should be another really good one. Our topic for this evening is going to be the business of making video games. Something I'm sure everybody watching and everybody on this panel has thought about at some point or another. But let's go around and introduce everybody. So, starting on my far right is indie game developer Shark, or Sharky Shark, currently working on project, or you're working on. I'll let you explain because I keep confusing Project Nexus and Nexus Games a few times.
I am Sharky. I am working on Project Triad, which is currently an unnamed game. We're working on getting that name. I run the development studio, Nexus Games, and Project Triad is a collectible card game along the lines of like Magic the Gathering or something, but with the, sort of more niche twist of going towards the mini game from Final Fantasy VIII Triple Triad, where you have a grid-based kind of layout and attacking in all directions and a lot more strategic than your kind of normal card games.
All right. And then above him is game developer from Game Dev Underground, Tim Ruswick. And why don't you explain people what the games that you've been working on?
Sure. So, first of all, I run a community called Game Dev Underground, which helps people build, finish, and launch better games. But I also have a studio, and currently we're working on two games. One is Cypherpunk. It's a stealth hacking roguelike, traditional roguelike. The other is Battle Barn Tactics, which is a bite-sized turn-based tactics game, kind of that takes place on a chessboard. And yeah, we've been working on it for a while. Battle Barn Tactics is launching in August, so I'm excited. I'm excited for the business side of it. It's coming up.
Great. How's that hacking game that you're working on too? Did you do any more with that?
It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. Everything's on fire.
Okay.
But we can, we can talk about the business lessons that I've learned about the difference between a good game and a sellable game.
All right.
For sure.
And then next to him, he is currently working. He is one of the members of Impeller Studios, working on the game In the Black, as well as teaching game design as well. Please welcome Jack Mamais.
Hi, I'm Jack Mamais. Like it said, I am currently teaching at Savannah College of Art and Design, or SCAD, as a professor of game design. So games are my life. I'm partners in the company Impeller Studios, and we're working on a super hardcore space sim that kind of harkens back to the 90s golden age of space sims. I was at Activision for a while and worked on the MechWarrior 2 series and the Heavy Gear 2 series. I also was lead designer of the original Crysis and lead designer of the original Far Cry.
Great. And last but certainly not least, he is from Hyperkinetic Studios, and he's currently working on the game Epic Tavern. Please welcome Tomo Moriwaki.
Hi. Thanks for having me. By the way, I think I ended up at Activision just after you must have left, probably, after that MechWarrior 2 era. I know there's a bit of a cataclysmic cleave in the timeline for Activision at that time.
Yeah, they became internal developers, and they decided they wanted to be publishers, so they sort of just kind of axed everybody that was in there. It was interesting. That was about, I think I left in 2000, essentially, and we were ready to go anyway, because it's like all the desks that had toys on them became desks that had file cabinets on them. So we knew which way it was going. And for me, like you were talking about the business of game development, I learned early on that the people that are in charge, for them, games are widgets. It could be a piece of bread, or it could be a shoe.
Sorry about that.
Something that can make money.
Sorry about that. My headset just crapped out just as you were saying that, Jack.
Do you need me to say it again?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind.
What part?
About its widgets, how they thought.
Yeah, I learned we had some people come in at Activision and we had meetings and they let me know that it wasn't being passionate about games really wasn't what we should be passionate about. We should have been passionate more about profit. So, and for me, I'm passionate about games, and for me, money is secondary. So, it was not a good fit anymore when I left.
Over the course of time, I've become more passionate about profits, but it doesn't seem to have hardly any intersection whatsoever with my game design skills.
The older I get, the more I think about profit for sure. But I think I'm still stupid about the game itself. So, because it's like your name is on it forever, and it's great to have a lot of money. Certainly, no one's going to complain about that. But at a certain point, money is limited, but your name and your reputation is not. So, I decided that I would always put my passion on the game itself and the love of games, and try not to sell out as best as I can. And so far, I've been pretty lucky that I haven't had to sell out yet. So.
Try not to sell out. That should be the alternate title, I think, for this discussion.
So I've been making games for about 22-ish, I don't know, since 97. I started at Treyarch, and shortly after starting at Treyarch in that period of time, Treyarch did become a part of the Activision family. Really on the downslope of the overnight cataclysm of internal development over there. That led to a nine-ish or so year stint, kind of culminating in fulfilling the role of creative director on Spider-Man 2. Then after that, I did some contracting consulting, very much connected to having a child, and ended up at EA for a little bit and did the Medal of Honor game in 2010. And then after that, found an opportunity with some buddies to start a company about 6 years ago called Hyperkinetic Studios. And, of course, we're working on Epic Tavern, which is maybe an all too ambitious attempt at disassembling storytelling.
Treyarch's really done well for themselves. I know a lot of people that work over there, and they've certainly done a good job on the Call of Duty series, and they've made certainly a lot of money on that. So it's good company.
It was interesting. It was interesting to see it transform into the kind of the juggernaut that it is today.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I guess to begin this discussion, then, one of the things I think for a lot of people, especially anyone watching this live record who are either first time or starting out, is about taking that step into game development. Because for everybody sitting here, again, we can all sit here and talk about our dream ideas. That could be like a 10-hour podcast. But the one area where I think a lot of people tend to struggle with, I'm sure for you, Tim, especially with game dev underground developers you've spoken to, you can attest to this. That idea of saying, I want to be a game developer. I want to make a living making video games. And that step can mean a lot of different things for a lot of people.
It absolutely can. I think, look, I've run a game dev YouTube channel for 4 years. I've made a few dozen games at this point. I still don't make a living fully off of my game dev. It's not easy to do, man. And I think there's like what I've dedicated my YouTube channel to is like figuring that out and sharing it, right? Like we're all in this together. Let's figure out how we do this. And not one of the things I've learned along the way is like I thought there was a secret. I thought there was an answer. I thought there was like a path, but it turns out there's a bunch of different variable ways that have pros and cons and a lot of different branching paths that you can take. And I'm excited for this talk because I'm going to learn a bunch from a bunch of people smarter than me.
Yeah. And like as you said, Tim, like with Game Wisdom, I've had a chance to speak to developers all around the world for almost a decade now. And the one thing that I've never heard is the same exact story about how they broke in, how they started making games. There is no such thing. And I guess like around the chat, like what do you think is the biggest like trap, I think, for a new developer, something that they should not do when they go, hey, I have this great idea, I want to turn it into a video game. And we'll start with Tomo, and then we'll work our way to the right for this one.
All right. Well, I mean, I think the first thing to get in your head is that you might not want to try to do something too big to start off with. That you want to practice completing loops, and that's the easiest trap to get into, is getting caught up in getting very focused on what you want to make, which what you want to make should be kind of a long-term personal goal, and practice to get good at trying to make those things being the short-term goal. So I think it's really easy to bite off more than you can chew, especially out the gates. And I say that having bit off more than I can chew outside the gates, and I seem to continually do that still over the course of my career.
All right, Jack?
Yeah, that's good advice. I would say two things. Something I've learned in the academic world is build your toy first. The thing that is your moment-to-moment experience. Because if that's fun, everything you layer on top of that's going to be great. And if it's original, you're going to stand out. So make sure, we call it a toy. It's basically a game without goals. So it's like you have something in your engine that you can play with. You get your, what we like to call the 3 C's working pretty good: your character, your camera, and your controls, and make those bulletproof. And the other thing is, don't just come in there and decide you're going to make what everybody else is making. Like right now, it's a bad idea to do a battle royale game. Because by the time you're finished with your game in 2 years, no one's going to want to play that game. It's going to be super old. So when you're on your own and you have an indie studio, certainly you have the luxury of doing what you want to without a publisher breathing down your neck. So be original and take chances, I think is what I would say. The guy who made Minecraft first, he took a chance, and now he's a god. And the guy who did PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds and Dota and all those games that became mega hits, they came out of nowhere, and they came because somebody was following their passion rather than trying to make the next Skyrim or the next Call of Duty.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that. I think most of the runaway hits end up being people that not following the trends, right? People kind of doing their own thing. But just to kind of go on what Tomo said, not biting off more than you can chew, I think what a lot of people don't realize when they say, hey, I have an idea for a video game, let me make it and make $1 million. They don't realize how many things are in that sentence, right? Mm-hmm. It's like saying, hey, I want to start a soap company. Oh, okay. Where are you going to get the soap? Are you going to make the soap? Are you going to buy the soap? Where are you going to get the money to get the soap? How are you going to get it shipped to you? Have you figured out the logistics of that? Once it's here, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to sell it to the people you know? Are they going to buy it? What if they don't buy it? What are you going to do? Like there's 10 million questions in there. And when people start a video game to make money, they don't realize they're taking on the technical challenge, the game design challenge, the marketing challenge, the business challenge, all of that.
Yep. You
can do one of those things and still have way too much to do, right? But if you do all of those things, it's going to be rough. It's going to be, I think one of the reasons why that's helped me tremendously, like with my YouTube channel, and the reason I've been able to like help people with marketing and stuff is because I spent 5 years building a marketing company, and like I had to figure out just the company stuff, like how do you do this stuff, how do you grow, how do you get clients, how do you understand this, and then also the marketing stuff, how do you get people to care about your product and all that stuff, and building and like selling that company and all that stuff, and getting out of that, coming back to game design and game development. I think I had a lens into like, okay, I want to make games, this is what I love to do, and so I had a little bit of experience of that, but still I was completely unprepared for everything. It's a lot of work in every direction, and I think one of the things that people can do early up front is to just not start with their dream game. Start with something that's so small you think you can do it in 2 hours, so that when it takes you 2 months, then you'll have a better idea of like where you stand and like how long things are going to take. And then after you've made a few games, then you can say, okay, I understand what it takes to make a game. What does it take to sell a game, right? Like, what does it take to market a game and all that stuff? I think that's a better perspective.
All right. And for you, Shark?
Well, I completely agree with all three of them. Tomo's got a good point about making your not taking on your dream game and whatnot, keeping stuff, smaller. Jaska's point about the, getting your core gameplay loop, and Tim here has a, start really small. build up, don't bite up more than you can chew. And my point is that while you can develop a game solo, and Tim does himself, solo development rarely works out. You often need a team, somebody who's got talents in multiple, because not everybody is an omni-talented person like Tim here, or the creator of Stardew Valley, So you often need a team, and if you want to get a quality game out, and you also pretty much can't go in without any kind of funding. You need funding for getting other teammates, getting equipment that you need, mics, headsets, a engine, whatever it is you need, you'll need money for it. Now you can do stuff on a very, very low budget, very minimum. You could potentially even get something for $2 to $5 grand kind of thing, but it's going to be impossibly hard on that kind of budget kind of thing, unless you just have all the talents in everything, which is very, very few people. But you need to really just be prepared for that kind of thing.
I think you brought up a really good point, Sharky, that I think there's a difference saying, hey, I want to make this big game and I want to sell it, versus hey, I want to make this big game and sell it, so I'm gonna refinance my house and get money from everybody and just put in all this risk, right? Mm-hmm. I think reducing that risk up front is an important part to the business side of it, because if, for example, if you don't have a computer or you don't have any of the technology, the investment that you're going to need to start video games is going to be higher than someone that already has a lot of that stuff, right? So they by default can reduce their risk and do it. I think somebody that works on a game on the weekends, right, versus quitting their job and just going in it hoping they make $1 million in 3 months, those are very different scenarios. And I think reducing risks, a lot of people, they think, how can I get marketing to make more money, right? But sometimes the better thing to think about first is, how can I spend less? How can I reduce the risks? How can I not overextend myself? And I definitely, as a solo developer, there's a lot of stuff to do. So I'm always looking for ways to reduce my risk. My current project that I'm in, it's got a 3-month timeline from start to finish. That's the hard limit. It's going to be a commercial game in 3 months, and that's specifically for partially an experiment for YouTube and stuff, but also to see 3-month game. Because you could spend longer and try to make more money on the back end, or you could reduce the investment that you have in the game to see if you can make the same amount, but just with less time investment. And so I think that's an important point to business in general too.
Right. And going off your point there, I think that when we're talking about money and everything, you need to consider your own time. Even if you are an omni-talented person kind of thing, your time isn't free, there, you could go out and get a job and make some money. You could already have a job and need to work it to keep yourself fed and everything. So you can't underestimate the value of your own time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think an important part of this is this idea that at the beginning there are a lot of hard challenges to overcome. And so kind of the safer you can play that beginning part and really start kind of delicately and carefully managing how you gain experience and understand better this whole process, especially as it gets into the complexities of the business, that if you can stretch that beginning out, you're protecting the beginning part. It's easy to get knocked out if you come in too hard.
I remember when I first bought a stick shift Camaro and I saw somebody drift, and I was like, oh, I could do that. That looks easy. So I went around a corner and then I ran into a stop sign. And it's harder than it looks, okay? Because the problem as a beginner is you don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. I did not know when I ran around that corner that my steering wheel was going to pull a certain way. I didn't know that my instinct would be to turn the wheel the other way, which is the opposite. I've since learned how to control vehicles and stuff at speed. And there's a lot of things that you don't know. And so I agree 100%. Is like, if you can give yourself a safe environment to learn those things that you don't know without epic failure, right? Like if you get all of your family and friends to invest all of their savings account, and then you're making a game, and then you got to learn that stuff, that's going to be a worse outcome than like you figuring that stuff out on the weekends for a year, you know?
Yeah, and something that ties into that point is something my automotive teacher taught me. We're sticking with the automotive thing. My automotive teacher taught me that one of the most valuable things I think he taught me while I was there is you need to know what you know, and you need to know what you don't know, so that you can see that, hey, I don't know this stuff. I need to go out and learn this stuff. Or, hey, I know this stuff. You know, what challenges is that it's lying in front of me, kind of thing.
When I was working on procedural generation for Cypherpunk, we built 6 different procedure generation systems, because everything that I saw was like, oh, Spelunky takes pre-made stuff and puts it together, but that's boring. I can definitely revolutionize the entire procedural generation industry. And after building 6 different algorithms, I realized that is by far the best way to do it. It's the easiest and fastest way to get good looking procedural generation in there. And it's like, I think a lot of beginners have that mistake of like thinking they don't know what they don't know, right?
Yeah.
Like, just like I didn't understand, like, why is everybody just pre-making stuff? That's like boring. Like, build a cool procedural generator, okay? Just do the hard
It's
thing.
just that easy.
Yeah. Turns out there's a reason, and following the wisdom of other people, and you know, putting your ego aside too, like really saying, okay, it's very likely that there's a good reason that people do things this way, and I'm trying to understand why they do things this way. It can help you kind of understand the things that you don't know, maybe. And then, like, I think that's a really good point of not knowing what you don't know, because then you don't just make these big massive mistakes. You can kind of take shortcuts. You can talk to somebody that knows it.
Yep, and I think I agree with everybody about it. Really comes, like we've said before on these kind of discussions, a game can fail by, you know, death by 1,000 cuts. Everything that you don't know suddenly coming back to bite you. And like we've said, like, this is one of those things, it's that kind of jump from going from a hobbyist or a student to saying, hey, I want to make an actual game for a living. And I think, as the group has said, just because you have an idea in your head doesn't mean you know how to turn that into a finished project. Again, as you said, Tim, that once you say, I want to be a game developer, all of a sudden you're wearing 6, 7 different hats at the same time, on top of actually having to build this game out. And then to Jack's point from earlier about, you know, starting with an do not try and copy somebody else's idea. This, again, is one of the, there's all these little things that, like for us, we've had experience, like collectively the 5 of us, looking at other games, we've played games, we can see all this stuff. And for people like us, if a game doesn't work, it's very easy in hindsight to kind of figure out why this game isn't selling right, or why this game isn't, selling, dozens or hundreds of thousands of copies. For myself, I do weekly indie spotlight streams here on the channel where I look at any and everything in terms of indie games. I've played, a first-time platformer from a 17-year-old student that I really enjoyed. I've played games from, teams of people that just didn't work out well. And I know for you, Tim, you do Feedback Friday. I think that's what you call it, where, you play games that are submitted by everybody. And you've had that chance, again, to see, like, for us, like, we can see kind of like all these red flags. But it's not something that if you don't know, you don't understand where to look, you're not going to see that coming.
It definitely, just playing a bunch of games and playing a bunch of developers' games has really helped me tremendously, because I am constantly being exposed to other people's mistakes. And like, when I make the mistake, it's hard for me to see it, because like I'm emotionally attached to the project. I can't really tell where it's good. But when someone else makes it, I'm like, oh, that would be so much better if you just did this. And I'm like, oh, because I got the clarity, right? Like, I can see it in their stuff. And then it makes me pay attention to stuff for sure. So like, that's another tip that I would give people too, is like, you want to learn stuff. like figuring out what you know and what you don't know, like playing a bunch of games, and not just good games, because that's a mistake a lot of people make. They play a bunch of good games and then they're like, oh, I know how to make a good game, but you need to play a bunch of bad games too, because the bad games teach you what not to do, whereas the good games might teach you what to do. There's a lot of stuff that gets lost, right? And it helps to, like, not only just from like a social networking perspective, playing other developers' games, giving the feedback can help too from like networking, but also like from a learning standpoint. Like, you play their game, what do you think is wrong with it? Why do you think that's wrong with it? Can you make a compelling case enough why something is wrong with it? And if you can't, do you understand it well enough, or do you need to work on your communication, or like where are you at in that process, right? It kind of helps you in a lot of different ways figure out and articulate what's wrong and what can improve.
Right. I would say that even playing a good game might not even get you anything. You need to play not necessarily the worst game in the world, like Gerald says there, with 64, but play some games with issues. Like we've encountered so many games that has for volume controls, it has on and off, so you can have no sound or all the sound blaring in your head instead of being able to adjust the bar in there to listen to the music without going deaf.
And I think another point why there's such that disconnect between the good version and the bad version is that good version has probably had hours, if not months, of iteration and refinement on that idea. It wasn't just somebody sitting at their computer for 3 years, never speaking to anybody, and then releasing that game. And I wanted to bring Jack in on this. As a teacher, you've had a chance to play. I don't even want to imagine like how many prototypes, demos, and first-time ideas from students, and what it's like to kind of see, the roughest version of these concepts.
Yeah, it's everybody comes into it with a different passion, and everybody has the games that they like. A lot of my students are big Nintendo fans because they're all in their 20s, right? So they all grew up with Nintendo and Wii and stuff like that. So they all want to build games that are a lot of them want to build games that are very Wii-like and very now Switch-like, and that's what they bring to the table. The ones that have stood out are the ones that really are passionate about their games, and the ones that have made really great games and great prototypes. And some of them have gone on to win festivals, and some of them have even gone on to be on Steam and be put up for sale. There was always one person on the team that had a vision for the game, and they would be the glue that would hold that project together. What I've been seeing recently is a lot of ideas are coming out of game jams. So people will get together in a game jam and they'll be really inspired by the theme or something like that. And because they're sort of unfettered and they're not really, the pressure is not on to make a game. They're just going in and they said in 48 hours, we're just going to come up with something. Some of the most creative and cool stuff has come out of game jam, and it might be certainly for people starting off, they might want to do a game jam and see if it's even making a game is what they want to do, because you get a little right there in that time of the game jam, you get a whole little development cycle, including publishing your game to their website. And the game jam site is actually a good place to go see a lot of games that have been made and a lot of ideas that have been sketched out, because there's literally tens of thousands of games on there, because they keep all the games on there, and they have for the whole time, like the last 10 game jams, and they put out about 20,000 games a year during the global game jam. So definitely what you guys are saying is, holds a ton of merit. Do something simple first. I mean, sadly I never listen to that advice, and I always go, the game I'm working on now has hard science as a backdrop, and it was probably insanity to do that. But on the other hand, it's something we've been working on for over 6 years, and most of our team is still working on it because it's they were passionate about it, and it's something that we feel that is important. And if we would have started with a small game, like let's say we were going to make a game I was kicking around one time was sort of a Master of Orion type game for iPhones, which is like a strategy galaxy building thing, which would have been a lot simpler than a 3D space sim. I think that the team wouldn't be around for that anymore. So I think it would have fallen apart. So it's a tough call. You definitely want to start. If you haven't done anything, you definitely need to start small, and you definitely need to have people that are good at what they do. You need to have a good programmer. You need to have a good artist. You need to have a good designer, a good producer, and you have to have basically all the roles filled with decent people if you're going to strike out, in this tough field.
Mm-hmm.
Jack, you brought up a really good point though, because like when people think of making a game, they don't think of what it might be like to keep somebody motivated for 6 years working on the same thing, or they don't think of like how all these people are going to interact with each other and stuff like that. So like there's a lot more to it than just the game, right? There's a lot of like skills in there, and I do believe that like keeping people motivated it's a skill as much as it is like a thing that happens. I think having a great idea and people are passionate about it is good, but
it doesn't matter what you're working on, you're gonna get sick of it. I don't care how great you think it's gonna be and how passionate you are about it and how passionate you are. I mean, I will never work on a game that's not science fiction, because I love science fiction. So I will always be interested in it, even after a long amount of time. Like if I had to work on a game, like I worked on a Spyro game, and I hated working on the Spyro game because it was like it was for basically it was for kids, and for me that was it was torture to work on that game. But you can put any kind of sci-fi in a game, and I'm totally into it forever. So you gotta do stuff that you really love, and then you gotta be aware that you're gonna hate it. 2 months into it, you're gonna be super sick of it and not want to work on it. But you gotta stick to your guns if you're gonna put it out, because you definitely want to ship it if you work on it. You do not want to just cut it off and stop it. You want to put it out. You've got to put it out, even if it's bad. It's better to put out a bad game that you ship. It's better for you to put out a bad game than work on a bunch of games that you think are good and not put them out, because you learn every time you do it. You learn and you get better at it.
And this is why, like, for a lot of people, I've argued the point about failing small. That it's better to have all these little mini failures you can learn from, versus, again, spending 8 years of your life on a colossal failure, and now you have no money, and as we said, you took out like 2 mortgages on your home, you borrow money from every family member you could think of, and you have nothing to show for it.
Yeah, or do a Kickstarter, and then you're you're risking other people's money, and sort of
Yeah.
And all the internet's mad at you.
Oh yeah.
You definitely can get people mad at you. Luckily, our customer, our backers, we told them it was going to be done when it was done, and they're pretty supportive of us. So because we have them on our Discord channel, and we're constantly doing tests with them. So I feel that they're happy with the product so far, even if it is taking longer than we would have liked it to take.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the same boat, but I think that even if you are successful, let's say you do get a lot of money, right? And if you're not going through the loops enough times, if you're not learning the right lessons, you're going to be running into those problems eventually. I mean, it'll come around. You might get lucky this time. That doesn't change it really much. I mean, I think though, kind of all along what we've been talking about is very much a game of reconnaissance and practice. That at the beginning you don't know what you don't know, so there is nothing to do other than figure out what's out there and figure out how it works. And to some extent you can jump in, but it'll be premature because there's so many things that you don't know about. And so you figure those things out and you practice and practice and practice, and it gets easier.
And it's an ever-evolving art form.
Yes.
A game is not painting, a game is not writing, a game is not filmmaking, it's not radio playmaking. It changes constantly. I mean, my team, I woke up today and we did our sprint meeting, and my tech director said, "Hey, you're going to kill me, but we're moving to 4.24 in Unreal." And I was like, "No."
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point about that kind. I think to Tomo's point about trying, you have to learn as you're making a video game. Because this is one of the things I've seen from a lot of from a lot of the smaller or kind of developers who try to build out over the last decade, that they'll either make a bunch of small games that they're reasonable to moderate success, nothing too amazing, nothing too bad, and not really learn anything from those titles. They're just making either the same game or they're just kind of making the same mistakes, and then they try to go big, and it fails. Because everything that they did, they really didn't learn from. And then on the other side, I've seen developers, and this is something that I've said a lot on the channel, that there have been plenty of really amazing games from indie devs over the last 10 years that one game was amazing, and then they never managed to follow up with anything anywhere near as successful as that game. Hand of Fate is probably one of the more recent examples for me. That studio made 2 really solid games. They still went out of business. Yeah. And to everybody's point, game design is ever changing. That's why this is a problem with trying to write books and have talks about, is that you write a book probably in a month or a year or a few months, it's probably not even relevant anymore. And I forget who we had. Oh yeah, I think I spoke with Rami Ishmael about this on a recorded cast that will be going up at some point. And he said that with Vlambeer, if he would have made the same games he did, 5-10 years ago, if he would have released them today, he probably would have failed. Because the market has changed that much, and so has, what people expect out of a video game. And again, this is something I think everyone can certainly attest to. That idea that a, super small, I'm just going to make a Pong clone and I'm going to sell for $20. That's not going to work anymore. Because for $10, I can get, a 30 to 50 hour RPG in some cases.
Yeah. You can get League of Legends, for free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot you can get out there. I think that's a really good point, though. Is people tend to either underplay or overplay how much luck and timing is involved in this kind of stuff. You've got people that are oh, well, this developer had a successful game, so he knows the formula. And every game, he can do it again. And a lot of people are successful don't know why they're successful. Mm-hmm. There's they tell you the same stuff everybody tells you. Make a website, go on a Twitter profile, do all that. But then you got the people that are oh, that's all luck. He just got lucky. Yeah, well, the more games you make, the more you work on stuff, the more you're visible, the more luck you're building up, right? Mm-hmm. The more likely you are to hit that wave or get that timing right if you do more stuff, if your iteration cycles are smaller, right? I personally, I hate the idea of luck. I'm one of those guys that just wants to figure stuff out, right? I want the perfect plan. I operate on lists. That's how I want boom, 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 boom. Here's a list I do, and then the results I want to be there. And I launched my first commercial game last year, and then we launched on Steam this year. That was the first commercial project out of all the dozens of games I make, and I learned a lot, man. I got my ego checked too, because this is somebody that ran a marketing company. I've made 7 figures for clients with my marketing. I figured I knew it, right? I knew what to do, and I did all the right things, and I didn't get the results I thought I was going to get. And that was wow, okay, well, and there's a great Star Trek quote that I love by Picard. It says, it's possible to do everything right and still lose. Yep. And it is. And that sucks.
Yes.
But that's reality.
I think you also have to look at it as there's a better chance that your game will not make it than it will make it. So I think you have to enjoy the journey and not be, not put all your eggs in, okay, if this doesn't make it, I'm going to quit. And, it's got to make it or not make it. Because it's tough to capture that lightning in a bottle for anybody. Because, the biggest game companies in the world will spend tons of money making, the next big thing, and it'll fall flat, even though they've done, countless focus groups and marketing studies, and they've got MBA from Harvard figuring it out. And then, some guy does a mod for Armed Assault and creates player-known battlegrounds, which creates billions of dollars of revenue. So no one about or Dota is made as a mod for Warcraft 3 and has created an industry where they can't back the trucks of gold up fast enough to riot. So you never know what's gonna capture the fancy of people, and whatever something today may capture the fancy, and something tomorrow may be a bust. So there's really no guarantee. So you've got to just enjoy what you're doing, and I think really treat it as a hobby until it is a business, and you can't expect to make money from it. And I think that's just the way it is in the creative field and in every creative field, especially game design.
One of the things that I've done along those lines, Jack, is, I mean, luckily I think I was smart enough to know that I wasn't going to be able to make a sustainable income from my game ahead of time. So I've got a YouTube channel, I've got a Twitch stream, I've got stuff, I've got other sources of income that are still around game development, right? They've still they're around the field, but they generate income from other areas. And I think that's something that I've been talking to a lot of developers about. I think it's come up recently. Like, a lot of people are starting to think that way, where it's like game development itself isn't as reliable as we want it to be. It's not as, even in other industries, like I can tell you, doing marketing, it's a lot easier to estimate the sales of a supplement, a weight loss supplement, than it is a game. Like, it's there's demand for a product. People want this product. You can get it in front of people that want it. They know they want it. They buy it. Boom. But a game is like, there are ways that we can estimate stuff, but it's a lot crazier. So like, I think we're seeing the rise, especially with like Patreon and stuff like that. We're seeing a lot of people turn to alternative ways to fund some of their games. I think there's some really interesting business models that are springing up, and I think games are leaning into how they're being funded a lot, and so I think we're going to see a transformation in games themselves.
Yeah, and
I think Jack had a really good point there about the building a game expecting it to succeed, especially on your first game. I mean, like, you might as well consider your first game as it's going to commercially flop. Like it's not guaranteed, but it might as well be. So you need to kind of plan on that first game being a flop, because knowing everything
hope
that you
for the
don't
best.
know.
Hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
Yeah.
The old saying, really. You might have a hit. More often than not, there'll be 30 people that download it on Steam. And then you're like, wow, I got 30 people. When you wanted 1 million.
yeah,
I got 27.
There you go. I hope we get that many.
yeah, and to Jack's point about never knowing what game is going to be that breakout hit, I mean, we've seen examples of this. Rodeo with Angry Birds, for instance. They had, I think, as a regular, they had like 70 different prototypes and games and projects that all failed before they got to Angry Birds. And nobody knows who Rodeo is without Angry Birds. Another really good example, Scott Cawthorn of Five Nights at Freddy's. As the story goes, he's been making small games and prototypes, I think, for 25 years before Five Nights at Freddy's blew up for him. And as you guys were saying, that when you try to ask people, how to become rich and famous in the game industry, there's no way they're going to give you a foolproof answer, because, it worked for them at that specific moment, at that specific time. It's probably not going to work for you a year or even like a month or two later.
That's right.
I think you can almost see it as the fact of there being these unique slots of success in any given time frame, and a big part of the game is figuring out what those slots actually are, and that the solutions for them are not the same as the solutions for other types of success. It's a very noisy, chaotic environment to navigate. Although part of it, I think something that's a common vein in what everyone is saying is, you can't guarantee results, and that leaves you with only one strategy. That is endurance. You need to be able to stick around. And so survival tactics, things like getting that other job, things like slowing down the amount of money you're spending, things like doing more research and recon, provided you can afford it, or whatever that ends up meaning. I mean, oftentimes you'd find another job and don't run the business as you gather important information. To be fair, once you jump in, there's a ton of information you didn't realize you needed to know. So some of that's unavoidable.
Yeah.
And you can look at big companies, and most of the time, look at famous game developers, and most of them just do one game that they're famous for, and
Yeah.
not 10 different games, right?
Mhm.
I mean, you know, occasionally you have people that can continue to have breakout success, but certainly more often than not, they'll make that one game that it does well, and then that's it. You know, they're always trying to chase that dragon after they put that one game out. They never, they never quite get there again. And they're just kind of like going, they're relying on the goodwill that they got from that one game. And that's the only thing that people want to see come out of them.
Oh yeah, and
So,
that's and like that right there is another very big issue. Like in terms of running a company, is that when you're doing things as a hobby, you can mess around with anything that you want. You know, nobody's yelling at you. There's no, pressure. Like, if I want to make a stealth-based first-person shooter or a match 3 puzzle game, I can do that. But when you're actually running a business and you have, hundreds, dozens, thousands, millions of people, looking at what you're going to be doing next, there's an enormous amount of pressure on you. And like you said, like I've seen that myself plenty of times with developers just trying to chase that success. Chris Park, I almost forgot his name, from Arcane Games, he's spoken about this many times, that the sheer success of AI Wars for him is what kept his studio funded. Because if he didn't have that game, he said this, he would have gone bankrupt many times because none of his games ever came close enough. And he was experimenting with so many ideas to the point that what he's working on right now is a sequel to AI Wars 2, because that was his biggest, most recognizable game, and he's trying again to earn a living.
Look at Bungie. Bungie came out with Halo, which, arguably was one of the biggest shooters of all time, and it's the game that made shooters work on console, because before that they really didn't work on console, other than a few limited hits like GoldenEye or things like that. It just wasn't fun on console, and they made it work by soft targeting and soft weapons and bouncy characters and stuff like that. But they come in there with a $500 million investment from Activision. They put Destiny out, and Destiny flopped all over the place, and they're still fighting back, trying to get Destiny rolling out the door. I hear lately they're having a lot of success. I've got some students who work over there, Bungie now, and they said now that they brought it back in house, they're starting to do something that people are excited about. But certainly, a company as successful as Bungie, who struggled with a game like Destiny, that arguably the art was 10 times better in Destiny than it was on Halo. And people were angry at them for making Destiny.
And I want to get to a few questions in chat, but one other point I want to bring up as we're talking about this, kind of like the hit or miss driven nature of this, is that another very interesting challenge about game development is that every genre, every design is its own unique beast. You can't say, I am the best platformer developer, let me go make a real-time strategy, it'll be just as successful. It doesn't work like that. And for like our big example of this, like speaking about AAA studios, we can look at BioWare. That BioWare for over 20 years was the premier RPG developer. Again, people hold Knights of the Old Republic, Mass Effect, Dragon Age, and so on, some of like the high points of that genre. Then they tried to make Anthem. And that Kotaku piece, like, it's basically like the Hindenburg crashing into the Titanic in terms of everything that went wrong in that design.
To be fair, though, EA is the game studio murderer, right?
Yes.
I mean, they killed Microprose and Westwood, which were arguably two of the best studios and two of the best, franchise creators of all time. So it's a wonder to me that they're still around after being with EA, because EA, they're like we were talking about earlier, they're in it for the profit, and they'll throw good people in there. And I've worked with EA, and I enjoyed working with EA. They were solid people, but certainly they have a way that they want games to be made. And if you don't make the game they want you to make, they will say, okay, like, I was sad when they bought DICE and they had DICE making a Star Wars game, for God's sakes, right? Because all of a sudden a good Battlefield game hasn't come out for a while because they were making Battlefront, which was not a good game, even though DICE is amazing. So I'm sure BioWare is just under, I've got students working there too, are under tremendous pressure from EA, and I don't know what happened with Anthem. I mean, arguably, I did not play it. It just held zero interest for me. And I'm a big BioWare lover of games. But for them to try to move into that shooter market out of an RPG market just was a mistake to me.
Yeah, and I think with you, when you take Anthem in, for example, it's really, you take a great studio of Type A and try to have it make a game of Type B and try to compete against the champion in the space at the time. It is going to be
Apex Legends.
And I mean, in the context of Apex Legends, they did that to themselves in so many ways, right? They released those games at exactly the same time.
Yeah, and that's gone now too.
Stories.
Because they went up against Fortnite, and Fortnite's the destroyer at this point.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, they at least probably sold a bunch of copies and made a lot of profit off Apex in a very short time frame. But
there was a while when everybody was playing it, but it certainly disappeared pretty fast. I mean, the way, in the context of things.
I just think in terms of the profits versus the expenditures, since it was premium price game, they sold their games and were able to move on. But I mean, welcome to today's world. Fortnite and Epic just did a fundamentally better job at supporting their user base and keeping the live updates going, and so they were able to beat out a bunch of newcomers who were trying to compete, and none of the ones that tried to attack them were able to kind of maintain the pace of updates. And Fortnite's now it's like an institution on planet Earth.
Yeah, and
Epic capitalized a hell of a lot on that too, through their engine, through their platform. Like, they really seized the whole opportunity of this thing. They're like, hey, it works. Let's just do everything that we can with this user base to maximize the potential. And I think, honestly, that game is probably the single reason why they are now a competitor to Steam. Like, they're, it's
always a game of how many monthly active users.
Yeah.
Tim Sweeney's had a lot of money for a long time, so that engine has made them a ton of money, and I think that's still their moneymaker. So, and they're having a hard time going against Steam, even though I go on every day and I download every free game they put out.
Yep.
But I still get all my games on Steam. That's just
I think
I prefer Steam.
I think their chances of success are very low. I think they're trying to climb a very steep mountain. They're giving it a damn good go of it, though.
I mean, look, Origin,
very low, but it's higher than everyone
Origin
else.
failed. Everybody failed when they go against Steam. That is the juggernaut, and they arguably, the reason I love Valve and I love Gabe, because they saved the PC game industry, because it was being destroyed by consoles. And if it wasn't for Steam, we would not have a PC game industry right now. I mean, because there was a time when PC games were sold in stores, and then there was a time around 2000, 2001 where you could not buy a PC. You can't buy a PC game in a store anymore. It was all about console games.
Yep. And
it was going down, and everybody was claiming that the PC was dead, and now PC destroys everybody as it should be. Thank you, PC gods.
Yep, I remember that as well. I saw those articles. Why buy a computer? Xbox will do it all for you. PC gaming is dead. PC gaming's on life support. All that stuff. And it's why, Valve and Steam have pretty much, they've earned, infinite goodwill among PC developers. And by extension, indie developers. Because if there wasn't Steam, we would not be having to talk about indie dev right now.
That's true. They pioneered, they pioneered what it means to be an indie dev, because they put out a distribution model, and they paid for the server space, and they have the spring and sales, and they have the landing page for you to see the latest games on there, and they gave people a place to get these games even if they were free. So they were really kind, and I was sad that they kind of left as a developer because I'm still waiting for Half-Life 3, but I was super happy to see Alex come out. I haven't played it yet, but I'm really glad that they're getting back into development because they're like Rockstar. I really love Rockstar and I really love Epic because they really are like they never disappoint. They just are like kings in the work that they do.
I think
Steam is a good example of that too, though, because like they built Steam on the success of their previous games as a distribution platform for their games, and they're kind of the same way Epic did with Fortnite, I guess. So even that, you see a lot of successful not a lot, but more than not, I guess, start publishing companies. Once you have a crazy runaway hit, and like you have millions of purchasers, it makes more sense to go into publishing than to make another game because it's a lot less risky to use your game to market other people's games.
I think the shine's off Fortnite though now. I mean, I always quiz my students, what are you playing right now? And none of them play Fortnite now. I mean, it is not.
Share the
right
secret.
now, every one of them has a Switch for sure. So I would think Pokemon is the monster. That's the killer right now as far as my students are.
At least right now, Animal Crossing seems to be
Animal Crossing. Yeah, I'm hearing a lot about that one. Sure.
My Twitter has been taken over by people getting very into Animal Crossing, and I haven't played that in like 20 years, I think, maybe a little bit more than that.
Yeah, I mean, but that is the game right now, that game, but Pokemon still is monster too, and Zelda, right? They were excited to show me the new Zelda game on Switch, and they just somehow Nintendo, it's definitely not my cup of tea. I hate most Nintendo games. They're not anything that I would ever waste my time playing. But they know what they're doing. They're really, really smart over there. I mean, it's no joke how smart those guys are.
There are just a couple of stats I want to share about kind of the relationship between Steam and Fortnite. So it's really hard to, if you make enough money, it has to be a huge amount of money to try to compete with someone who holds the platform, basically, like Steam does. And it didn't look like there was going to be any competition. And certainly competition is going to make things better for all of us, both the devs and the player base. And so Fortnite made $1.8 billion last year, and Steam, selling all the other PC games, made 4.3. So these numbers, obviously, Steam is way ahead of them. And I guarantee you that their sales on their store are very low in the grand scheme of things. They don't compete with these numbers. But Fortnite's success is so crazy big that it bought them an opportunity to fight against the giant. It is a crazy story. We'll see how it turns out. I mean, part of me hopes that they stick it out a real long time because I get a lot of really great games from them, and I like that they're trying to pressure Steam into doing a better job, which doesn't bother me either.
The one thing I like about Fortnite, and I'm not a Fortnite player at all, I tried it and it just was not my cup of tea. It shows you how important game design is because when Fortnite came out, nobody was playing it. It was a completely different game. It was like you would build a fort and then zombies would attack your fort at night, right? And then until they put that battle royale thing in that was just at the right, perfect time, that is the one thing that made it sell $1.8 billion of product. It's just that game design idea, right? Used in the right way. So it's pretty amazing how valuable games are. Game designs
they were smart enough to jump on that, though. They canceled their other projects. They took everything else they were doing. Like, what did they have? Like $90 million into that other game? They canceled it. They were just like, boom, it's gone. Here's all the assets. Everybody can have millions of dollars of assets. We don't care. Like they jumped on it, and I think that's there's a lot of windows of success, right? Openings, timelines that are like happening, and sometimes you can go in a timeline, but you got to jump on it right there. You got to maximize that at the point. And Fortnite, I think, even the battle royale change, I think, was them jumping on it. Right? They released the game. Everybody was like, Player Unknown Battlegrounds was going fantastic. They're like, oh, what if we just did that? Right? That's doing really well. They're jumping on it. So if one thing you could say about Epic is they are fantastic at capitalizing on their opportunities, and I think that's a big business lesson too. Because it's not just about
but only in that one little sliver. So because what else have they done that's been that big? Infinity Sword was a kind of a bomb. I mean, Paragon was a bomb. All those other games they've made, they definitely, Paragon was trying to capitalize on that whole League of Legends MOBA vibe, and that bombed. So they had the ability, because they had a lot of money, to throw it out there and try stuff. But
no, we don't see the failures too, and that's the thing. It's like
I see them.
Yeah, but like they're all. That's the problem too. Like when people say, "Oh, well, he just made one game and he was successful." No, he made like 53 games. You just never heard of any of them, right?
Yep.
So yeah, that's true. Like we like, at least like people on the outside, we see only the things that come above the water level, right? All the
they
things
tried a lot of stuff though.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of product coming out of Epic for a while, and only Fortnite has broken through. I mean, and it's broken through in a massive way. I mean, they had everything right. They had the game mode that everybody liked. They had an art style that was accessible to kids. They had dancing, dancing emotes.
All games need dancing. That's how you make millions of dollars, people. Just put dancing in your game.
I think the example though reinforces what we were talking about, just kind of in general for business and video games. You need to be in a position where you can fail. If you're not establishing enough of a foundation to make it through failures, there's too much uncertainty, and that even the biggest companies can put a bunch of effort and really kind of fail hard. And if that's true, then the little people that know less are going to have the same kinds of problems. And so you got to be able to survive. Endurance becomes the game again. We're trying to create extremely sharp, memorable moments for people in the creative side of it, but the business side of it has got to be as slow and as survival focused as possible.
Yeah, it's scary. I mean, I look at my old company Crytek that I love the earlies, and I love all the guys at Crytek, and they were on top of the world for a while, and then they kind of it kind of started to go down, and they even Crisis 2, Crisis 3, they were okay games, beautiful, but they just definitely they were sort of riding on a Call of Duty vibe there for a while, and I think that was you render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Call of Duty, don't mess with that linear, cinematic sort of vibe, because you're going up against, you can't mess with Call of Duty because the people they have on there are just unbelievable. They even made a game. They even made Rise, which was that Roman game, which was amazing, and it just did not do well, and they've been struggling for a while. They recently, some good buddies of mine, Chris Audi and Magnus Lebrant, they put out Hunt Showdown, and that's a cool.
I like that
game.
one.
It's cool. Lovecraft meets post Civil War, the South, which is totally original. The gameplay, it's absolutely gorgeous, and I think it's doing well, but I don't think it's like going nuts, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and like building off like your point from Crytek, we can look at Maxis as well. Like Maxis has certainly had its ups and downs, and I think this is kind of connects what we've talked about before with how the things you don't know can screw you in many different ways. Because from the outside, when people think about these major companies, they seem like these monolithic entities. Call of Duty is Infinity War. Telltale was Wolf Among Us, Walking Dead was Telltale, but you don't know what is going on during that development. Like Telltale, another really good example. Nobody could have predicted from the outside that company was going to crash. I mean, the accolades they earned, the prestige they had, but when you look at the inside of that, it's like, how did they even survive? Like when we heard the story,
they didn't own the IPs, right?
Yeah.
It was Walking Dead, and it was Batman, it was Borderlands, and it was Game of Thrones, and it was just the same game over and over and over, and they didn't own the IP, and it was people who owned the IP that made the big money off that. And those games were pretty neat, but they sort of like just dragged that out too much in a way. I think people lost interest in it after a certain point.
Yep.
And I
And
think they had one or two hits, right?
yeah.
Walking Dead
the
was
rest were just-
Walking Dead was massive for them, and they did
yes.
and it was actually a fantastic game. I played it, and for a story-based game, it was really strong They did a lot of great stuff about it, but then they had so much product coming out, where eventually they were putting stuff out that was garbage. Like I tried to play the Batman game, and I'm a huge fan of Batman, and it was bad, right? I mean, it was terrible. And Borderlands, as a story game, that for me, I was wondering, who came up with that idea and thought that would be a good idea. I mean, maybe it made money, but I can't see how, because it's like, Borderlands is a great game, but it's great in its realm, basically. And I wouldn't say story would be the big thing that makes Borderlands great. I'd say, definitely be procedural weapons. So, it's tough. It's tough.
Yep.
All right. We got tons of questions we need to get to.
Yeah, and I think just to wrap up this one point there, again, like, there's all these little windows that you have to be able to understand and be able to capitalize on. Because ultimately, like, this is why there's so much danger in multi-year projects. And as we've said, you could be making your best version of a game. In that 3 to 5 year whatever span, somebody could make something even better. Or even like the whole PUBG Fortnite thing, that is such like a weird anomaly, I feel. Because again, like, nobody really heard of, whole Battle Royale King of the Hill form. There was, H1Z1, there was a King of the Hill game, I mean, there was a few other ones. PUBG was positioning itself to be that #1 game that we were all going to talk about. And then, it just happened out of the blue. Like, nobody expected Fortnite Battle Royale to blow up. And then once again, we're in that position where everyone's just thinking, oh, they succeed because they made Battle Royale. I'll make Battle Royale. Surely I'll be able to capitalize on Fortnite.
Well, you see a lot of Battle Royale product out there. Call of Duty has Battle Royale. DICE has Battle Royale now. Apex Legends was Battle Royale. Hunt the Showdown was Battle Royale. They're all Battle Royale, basically, but only PUBG and Fortnite are the ones taking all the money. And the thing about PUBG, that was just a fun as hell game. I mean, I think that's why it made it. And I played that game for a solid year, daily, because it was just fun. I mean, the way the maps they made, and the way they had vehicles, and they just had so much content and stuff in there, and and the players in there were really fun. It was just, it was a lightning strike when it came down, and for me, that was like, it was amazing that they had made that game. And I could see where everybody wanted to jump on that bandwagon, because it seems like a relatively easy design to pull off. But it's like right now, I wouldn't touch a battle royale game with a 10-foot pole. If I was doing a game, if I was doing a shooter, it's just too dangerous.
Yep.
I think something though that we want to point out is, I think a lot of what we've been talking about really recently is kind of points to the game can be good or bad, and that can have a really big effect on how the kind of business plays out. But I think in the case, even in the case of Telltale, there are all these choices that can be made that are causing the future destruction of the company. And ultimately, I think their real story was that they were overextended from a development standpoint, and when that starts happening, you're spending like a lot of money. Like there's kind of two totally different types of calculations to make. One is big studio and one is not big studio ultimately. But they were probably burning $1 million a month or something probably. And next thing you know, we got 4 things going at the same time, and now anything can happen, and we're not going to be able to make ends meet. And then it gets real bad real fast from that point. And it's real easy for companies who have been successful to have enough resources to try to get into that much trouble, basically.
So true.
Yeah, that's a good point. The more you have, the more you can throw at it.
Yep, exactly. So I think with that, let's get to a few of these questions, and then we'll see what other topics we can discuss. So Gerald asked this earlier. What kind of budget do you aim for when making games, and how do you determine what the budget will be?
Well, one of the things that I think is really important when it comes to trying to figure out budget is, well, one, you can always analyze the game design and scope it out and see how much that you think that'll cost. But before you get to that design, sometimes you might want to be doing an audience analysis and understand what is the absolute maximum number of people you could sell this to, right? And then once you have that number, you kind of got to assume that you're not going to sell it to all those people. And so now you can have like a value from 0 to 1 where you rate your ability to reach the people that would buy this game, and you have to make some guesses about quality.
Yeah.
And if you can, those numbers or that calculation needs to somehow start homing in on, well, that's the most amount of money I can make selling this game. Now, how much money am I going to put into it to maybe they make that amount back?
Yeah.
Ryan Clark has something that I've really learned from him. Whenever he does analysis on a market for a Steam game, he usually looks at like the top selling game in that genre, like the absolute like beast, and he looks at that as the cap for the entire market. So like what that game did is the ceiling for that entire genre. Like that's the maximum you can make in there. And granted, there's all kinds of gray areas in that, but I think that's a good way to look at it. And then just assume that you're not going to come near that. You're probably not going to come near that. But you can use that if you understand, like, okay, what's the cap? Then you can look at a couple other games and say, okay, where did they fall in that? Are they all way super low? Is that just an outlier? Is that just an insane, crazy, like, is that a Fortnite basically? Which just it doesn't. You have to remove it from charts because it throws off all the, the data when you look at it. Or is that a good indication of like where the genre's at? And then two, like how many people are in that space? How many games are coming out in that genre constantly? Because there can be high demand, but there can also be high supply in which you're going to get lost. Platformers, I think, are a good example of like really high supply. There's just a lot of them that come out all the time, and as a result, most of them just get ignored. I'm not saying you can't succeed making a platformer. You probably can. I'm not going to try that again because it's not I don't think it's a good fit for that kind of, when you do that kind of analysis. As far as budget goes, one thing I would say is, as an indie solo developer, just give you a lens who this is coming through. I would not even start to think of a budget before I had a playable prototype. Just like I was sure of what I was making. Like, okay, this is like not even a vertical slice. I think a vertical slice would give you a better indication of where you should be, but I would just have like a solid prototype of like it's playable and people can play it and it looks good enough to them to know what the cubes are, right? They're trees instead of cubes and that kind of thing. Just people can get the idea of it. And then from there, I would figure out. I guess there's a bunch of different ways. How I'm doing it is I'm attempting to lock my scope and lock my time investment. So this is kind of an experiment in this whole budget design, but Barn Battles is coming out in August. It was started 2 months ago, and I kind of let it sit in my head for a little while. So really it's a 3 to 6 month dev cycle. Mm-hmm. And that's a hard date. Like that's a hard limit. And so the way that I'm getting the budget is basically my monthly burn, right? Like how much time I spend, and then minor little things like hiring somebody to do music and stuff like that. And that's the budget estimation. I'm sure it gets much more complicated with multiple people on teams and stuff like that, though. Maybe somebody else can talk.
I see two worlds when you're coming up with a budget. You have, if you're in the business, AAA, the way you do it is each person, you figure out what their burn rate is per person, and you average that out. So I remember when I was at Activision, the burn rate was about $10,000 per person per month. And then you're like, okay, how many people do we need to make the game? Okay, we need 3 coders. That's $30K a month. We need 4 designers. That's, even though they would make different money, there was still an average, because a programmer makes a lot more than a designer, and makes a lot more than a QA guy. But if you have that average, you can say, okay, this is going to be a 12-person team, and the burn rate's $10,000 per person, so it's $120,000 a month. And you look at it and you go, okay, what is it going to take to make it? It's going to take 3 months. It's going to take 6 months. So if it's 3 months, you're looking at 400,000. A year you're looking at 1.2 million. Professionally, when you have somebody, you have somebody backing you, and money is not an issue. Well, it's always an issue, but at least there's a resource for you. But indie, sometimes you just got to go sweat equity, and so you have zero budget, and it's just like, okay, everybody's just going to pitch in whatever time they can, and work a side job, and you're just gonna it's gonna take you longer to do it, but you're just gonna, everybody's gonna do what they can. That's kind of the way we're doing on our current project. And we did a Kickstarter, and we made 170 on the Kickstarter, and that certainly helped for a while. But that certainly didn't fund the whole project,
Yes.
right? So it's different. It's you have to do it different ways, and it's you're talking about, are you going to, if you have a company, do you give equity in the company to the people working there, and how much is that value to them, as opposed to, are they making a daily salary? So it can be wildly a differential between indie and AA or AAA funded projects.
Yep.
That equity is worth nothing unless things work out.
Yep.
But it's a dream. It's the stuff that dreams are made of, right? Who would have loved to have equity on Minecraft, right? I'd love to have had a little piece of Minecraft.
Yeah, I know for myself, it's very, very different. Since I have a team and everything, but like the way I determine my budget is, first I have a game that I'm confident in to go forward with, and like, this is what I'm going to make, kind of thing. I'm going to finish this game. This game's going to finish. This game's going to launch. I am confident in this game getting done and potentially making money if I do everything right and get lucky. So then I take that and I know what I need. I need an artist and a programmer, and I'm handling everything else. And then then I look at my wallet and realize that I've got $5 in here. What am I going to pay him with? And then I realize, I've got the savings of like $2,000 or $3,000 or however much over here. Just a little bit of money. And then I work around the game design and whatnot in order to get that low enough that I can find a talented enough person to come in and work for basically peanuts, but not too bad of peanuts, that will actually do what I need, get the quality that I need to get things done. And I put these ads out on like tons of different Discord channels, and I'll find an artist. I technically found an artist that was willing to do the work that I needed for $300, but he didn't do anything. So I went looking again and again and again and again, and eventually I found somebody who was amazing and really was really invested into the game. And I think that's really a key point of why I was able to get somebody so talented for so cheap, is because he wanted to see the game to completion, kind of thing. He wants the game, it's like he was willing to put in the sweat equity, even though like there's no equity in there for him. It's just the peanuts kind of thing. And we talked, and we came up to a price, which was the same price I offered, which was peanuts. But he said, he said, well, if you sell X amount of copies, and make so much money, would you think about a bonus for me? I was like, I'll do you one better. I lowered down that X number, and I said, if we make this much, I guarantee a bonus for you. And, I also found somebody for programming the same way, kind of thing. And, and those guys wouldn't stick around if I did not treat them well. So, like, you've got to treat your people well. I mean, this goes for every company, but like, you especially got to treat them well if you're paying them peanuts, kind of thing, because like, if you're wanting them to crunch or work on weekends or anything else, if you're expecting the world out of them, they're probably not going to last very long. So like, like my artist, he doesn't like working on weekends. I was like, take the weekends off. If he'll come to me and be like, these days are not good for me. I was like, take them off. If you need a day off, just take it. You don't even got to ask. Just all I ask is that you get the work done in a timely manner. It doesn't matter when you take off or whatnot. Just do whatever you want. Just try to get us at least a decent amount of art every month, kind of thing. That's all I ask. And make sure to we set up payments in three payments and everything. And like I set it up for the first third. When he gets the first third, he gets the first third payment, and then the second third he gets a third, and when he completes it, he gets a final. Well, I paid him the first third early, because he was doing such an amazing job, and I'm about to pay him the second third early, even though I think he's probably about, probably about 55, 60%, so it's not too early compared to that 66%, but, I needed to get the money out of the bank because, of the coronavirus episodes that we're having and everything. So, but like my guys like me. They really like me and everything, and they really believe in the game, and they're willing to put forth that extra effort and put forth, with the peanuts and everything, deal with the peanuts in order to see this game that they really want to see completed.
The one thing I'll say to that, Sharky, is I'd be, at least in my personal life, I'm a little wary of passion for two reasons. One, it's fickle and it's not reliable all the time. Passion can come and go on certain things. And two, it can be exploitable sometimes. It can be... sometimes it's hard to kind of see the line of like where someone is doing this because they love the thing, but who's benefiting really, like which end. And I think we see this a lot in like AAA studios. They push it a little too far with the crunch and with that stuff. You're passionate about it, good, give us 80-hour weeks for the same salary, right? Like so it's a slippery slope, I think, and it makes me wary as a business owner to rely a little bit on that. But I definitely agree with what you're saying about treating your people good. I think person-to-person skills and just treating everybody like humans, I think, is a fantastic idea.
Well, they were...
go ahead.
They were fine with the amount of money kind of thing. They were just, because they want to break into the industry more than anything kind of thing. And they believe in the game to be able to do that kind of thing. But I'm not taking advantage of that as much as possible because, like, I'm treating them well as, if I'm able to, I'm going to pay them more. Keep in mind that the peanuts I'm paying them isn't like super peanuts kind of thing. Like, it's not like completely ridiculous. Like
just to be clear, I wasn't accusing you of any of that. I was just, I'm not trying to call you out. Just to be super clear, I get you.
Yeah,
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I understand. But like when I say that like the job that I'm hiring out, would probably go for probably somewhere around 1,800 to 2,200, somewhere in there, and I'm paying 1,000 for it, kind of thing, and because that's all I had to pay out with it, and it's stuff like that. It's not like, oh, I'm asking them to do like, a $200,000 job and here's $10 kind of thing. But like, you definitely have to at least meet them halfway kind of thing. And even then you're still going to have problems, finding somebody that will, meet you that halfway with, potential bonuses at the end.
I think this brings up a really important point for the audience to be thinking about, is that when it comes to the business of games, the range is insane.
Yeah.
It goes from hundreds of millions of dollars of money for development to down at this really small scale. Like, I noticed that maybe you're free for summer vacation and maybe you could help me out a bit. And I promise, as we grow, if we grow together, I'm gonna stay with you. I mean, the beginnings of things, they can be done at an extremely low budget. It just requires a lot of earnest socializing and really connecting with people. It's like, hey, let's band together, like, and go on a quest, and let's really give it a shot. Let's show everyone else that we can do that. And every time that happens, every one of those people that are involved slowly start evolving into the kinds of employees that where that no longer will be appropriate eventually at some point.
Yeah.
Questions like about what budget should I pick? It's kind of like, what car should I buy? It's like, okay, like where
But the basic
do you
math,
want? Yeah.
you can't escape the basic math, right? The basic math is you can't spend more money than you know you can't make.
Yeah.
Right.
Unless you're making the game because you enjoy making the game and you don't mind if it doesn't make enough money. But that ultimately that fits back into some of the earlier things you were saying. Is if it's not sustainable, then you're not really in the business of games either.
So what would you guys say is a bigger mistake? Underestimating the task or overestimating the sales?
Overestimating the sales always.
Really?
Because that can be orders of magnitude off, whereas underestimating the task can only be 50% off. Really.
That's true.
Yeah, and you're literally pulling it out of your ass when you're making that guess. But which as the task, you pretty much, if you're working with good people, they know generally how long it's going to take to do things, and you can do a backlog.
That's a
and you
big
can
assumption,
estimate.
Like, 'cause there's a lot of
different
beginners that like think they know. That's like not knowing what you don't know, right? So yeah, I agree with you. If you're working with people that have been in the industry and solid and know stuff, they're pretty good at estimating their stuff. Maybe you add 50%, 20% or whatever, just the hell of it, but on top of the time. But
My students
Yeah.
are pretty good. They do
Are
pretty
they?
good estimates. Yeah, they're just starting off, but they're pretty
That's good to
darn
hear.
good. I'm amazed at them sometimes that their estimates that they make.
And to kind of like build off of this point about understanding what the audience of your game is, again, this is something that I think we see a lot of first-time developers make that mistake of, that I'm going to build this never-before-seen game, nobody has ever thought of this concept before, and I will corner the market, and then you realize that only them and maybe 5 friends actually like this game. Or that whole idea, and I'm sure again for Tim and Shark, like when we've seen and played so many indie games, that we've seen these very weird titles that it is so razor thin of a niche that nothing really, like, even if it is a good game, it's like, did you expect 100 people, like hell 1,000 people to even play this idea, that it's just such a weird, so specific of a release.
Yeah, look at Kerbal Space Program. How did they think anybody was going to play that game?
Yeah.
Holy mackerel!
You
And it's
know,
like the
and-
biggest thing ever.
It's huge. It's huge, and I would not have said that would have sold millions of copies, right? I mean, that if I would have, someone would have told me a game that I've got to watch an hour of YouTube videos to be able to like make this thing take off, let alone get to the moon and land and come back, which I've never been able to do.
Me neither.
It's like I would have been shocked, but like it just went crazy. And on the other hand, you take something like Star Citizen, that's raised $300 million, and it's not really a game yet.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
I don't believe that game is ever going to come out.
The latest build is pretty good. So what I'm saying, I mean, their art is amazing.
It looks fantastic.
it's astounding art, but it definitely feels like a pyramid scheme to me or something. The way they sell ships for $3,000 a piece and stuff like that. It's like that is definitely a passionate audience, to be sure. I wish we had that audience, but and I guess Chris Roberts' name really carries a lot of weight because of all the games he made. But then again, I can ask my students now if they've ever heard of Wing Commander or Privateer, and that none of them have.
Yeah.
Even the Wing Commander movie has certainly faded off into the mist, right? But somehow Chris Roberts, brought in $300 million for that little sucker.
It's not young people coughing up cash for that, by the way.
No.
I gotta guess. But I didn't jump on board. And Privateer. I'd say Privateer is my favorite game of all time. If I had to pick one game, I'd say it's Privateer. And I won't pay a dime for Star Citizen. I won't do it. I'm playing other people's copies.
And
It's become its own. It's like its own reality TV show. It's not clear what's going to happen.
Crazy.
I'm worried because I don't want to see a story where that much crowdfunding goes south. That's going to send the wrong message. Crowdfunding.
It hurt us a lot on my game because we were like, "Oh, you're that game like Star Citizen." And we started working our game actually before we even heard of that game, and then it came out and it just took, like an airlock. It just took all of the oxygen out of the chamber, right? So
Yeah,
it like just sucked it dry, and it was scary.
Yeah. And this goes to a comment Mr. Elrud said a few minutes ago about kind of the success of companies like Paradox and Firaxis, that their games are popular, but in the same vein, they're still very niche. Like, I love XCOM. I just bought a Chimera Squad the other night, but I don't have any doubt that that game is not making the same amount of money as Call of Duty or Battlefield or anything like that. The same goes for Europa Universalis and Paradox games, but they work because they deliver that experience. If I want an XCOM game at that level quality, I really only have one choice. That's Firaxis. Phoenix Point's been okay, but I'm not hearing people declaring it the XCOM killer. Likewise,
because it's not on Steam.
Yeah, and
but man, you gotta admit the first XCOM is so much better as a game. Even though the new XCOMs, they have amazing graphic. Dude, the first XCOM UFO Unknown, that game, I played that hundreds of hours. And I won it, and then the sequel came out, and it was literally the hardest game in history.
Yes, I've heard.
I've never been able to beat it. Terror from the Deep, so hard, and I've started it like 20 times. I played the new XComs. I played them start to finish, but they feel empty to me compared to the other. The original XCOM had so much more.
I have Open XCOM, the open source like modern day friendly version. One of these days, I should just try and get through that one more time. Oh, yeah.
I think something worth noting, though, is that these games are very, very profitable for the developers. That Call of Duty costs more than 10 times, sometimes more than 20 times, sometimes even more than that, than some of these other games. And, like XCOM 2 sold at least a couple million units on Steam. And what is its price? Probably like $30 or something.
Yeah.
Like, there's a whole lot of money that was made there. They're not spending that much to make those games. So those are really great games for the developers, but they don't compete the same way as it's not like when Borderlands 3 shows up on the scene and suddenly literally everybody is getting the game. They are a little bit niche though. Europa Universalis, by the way, also typically sells between 1 million and 1.4 million on all of their versions. So it turns out to be I think Paradox might be like the second largest PC publisher out there.
I was shocked when I found out how much Borderlands sold. I mean, they sold like 40 million copies or something. I mean, it's unbelievable.
It's like Skyrim. It's just crazy. It is a PC anomaly.
And I think Mr. or someone else mentioned, of course, Jeff Vogue of Spireweb Software. They're another really good example of this. I mean, Jeff has been technically making the same game for the last 30, 40 years. But he keeps his budgets, he keeps his design so razor focused that even if they sell 400 or 500 copies, that could still very much be a profit winner for them. Imagine an EA game only selling 500 copies.
There are people that certainly stick to that. You look at Zachtronics games; those are all very similar. You look at Jake Burkett; he's made a lot of solitaire games.
Yeah.
I think you could build a viable business that way. I think what we're talking all these AAA crazy major hits, but a lot of people don't get that there are a lot of very profitable games you never heard of. A lot of them, and we kind of only see the surface area of the ones that make it through all the barriers. So they are kind of the breakout anomalies because we've all heard of them, even though we have no desire to play them or whatever. Like Borderlands. I don't have a desire for Borderlands, but I've heard it 10 million times.
Yeah,
right?
Great co-op, probably the best co-op game out there. I'll put it out there.
Yeah.
It's definitely fun to play with your friends as a co-op game. And
I played Borderlands 2 with my girlfriend, and she took all the guns, and so I'm mad. I'm upset still. So maybe I have something against Borderlands because she would just give me the hand-me-down guns.
Well, I mean, there's unlimited guns in the game. It's not a real problem.
Yeah,
maybe that's part of it. But that's a big point too. There's a lot of very profitable games that are just we've never heard of, and I think part of a budget is finding those things and figuring out where they're at.
And look at the mobile games out there. I mean, like Clash Royale and games like that, and how many of those tycoon games are on the mobile games where it's it's all the same game, and they have the commercial, and it looks like this amazing game with all these little soldiers fighting and stuff like that, and then you play, and it's make your farm, and now here's your gold, and then it's all the same game.
Then wait 5 hours.
They pull in billions of dollars on those crazy games.
Yeah, but a lot of those are breaking the rules and doing false advertising.
Yeah.
Well, they also have such a large user base.
Who said there were rules, right? Money. There's no rules. If you're making money and you're a business, you break the rules. And if you can get away with it, your people are making good money and you're making games. So
Until
not
you get
that we
caught.
break the rules. We never break the rules. Never at Impel. Never break the rules.
If you get caught, you just pay the fine.
I don't think
At
there's
some
a
point, that's
fine.
cheaper.
I don't think there is. I don't think there is a fine. I don't think
I just
there.
mean at scale. At scale, you can so flagrantly break the rules that being in big trouble just means they're going to take a cut.
And I wanted to elaborate on what Tim just said about how we view the successes when it comes to independent space. Because this is something that I've been saying a lot more, and I've been calling out like major sites about this. That, like you said, Tim, like for every amazing or unique game that breaks to the surface, there's probably a good several hundred games that nobody has ever heard of. And for people trying to learn kind of like what goes in making these games, if they only focus on those major hits, like we said, you're going to miss out on a lot of those titles. The example I always go back to is Darkest Dungeon. That there are so many games that have tried to copy Darkest Dungeon style. Aratus just came out this past week, which I think is probably the best of the ones that I played. But so many people have tried to copy that same style because IGN mentioned it, and PewDiePie played it, and Markiplier, and so on and so forth. And all they see, again, is that surface layer of, it's a grimdark RPG, got mentioned on IGN, it must be an amazing game, let me just copy that. But
Yeah, the streamers and the influencers, they've totally skewed the whole situation.
Yep.
I mean, you get PewDiePie playing anything, and that's going to sell millions of copies.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what it is or how bad it is; it's going to sell millions of copies. It's unbelievable to me how much power these people have.
Well, I've actually heard recently that there of several developers that did have PewDiePie actually play their game, and they didn't get basically any sales at all.
You got to pay. He doesn't play games for free. You got to pay him to play games. He doesn't play because he likes games. He plays it because he gets paid.
It's a two-sided equation, though.
We had a lot of people approach us and they said, "Hey, we're sponsored streamers and we have X many followers, and we'll take this much money." Right? Where it's a full business.
Oh yes. I've tried. I've always had that very weird line how I view games. Like, if a developer sends me a key for a game, I'm going to play. Again, with the fact that I do weekly indie spotlights now, I've played, all kinds of games. But I have received offers to do sponsored pieces. I'm actually working on one right now. But I'm so much of a niche in terms of how I analyze games and what I focus on that, again, I am not going to even try to say that if I play your game, I'm going to earn you PewDiePie levels of money. That's not going to happen. I think Shark can agree with me on that one, right?
Yeah. You earn a lot more for the people at your view count than others would, but in the your view count strictly eliminates a lot of sales.
Yeah.
I think you do have to have a sellable project. Just to share some data with you guys, Philophobia for the Steam launch, it got played by GT Live, which had 200,000 views or something on the video. Didn't make a dent in sales. 200,000 people watched that video and didn't make a dent in sales. So I think it has to do with there's a lot more than just the straight up numbers, right? There's the compatibility, there's how well your Steam page sells stuff, there's how whether or not your game is consumable, right? Whether they've consumed the whole experience watching someone else play it, then can't get anything else by buying your game, that kind of stuff. So I think there's a lot to that, but it's interesting to think about.
Yeah, I think PewDiePie definitely increases your odds kind of thing, but I don't think it's a guaranteed anymore. Back in the day, I think it was, but now I don't think so. I think it's highly likely for success if PewDiePie plays your game, but not guaranteed anymore.
I think
go ahead.
What I was going to say was, I think what we're seeing, at least from on the smaller scale, are like YouTubers who cater to specific genres and they build their fan base out of those genres so that if they like that particular game, their name carries weight with that. And to give you an example of this, I know Beagle Rush did a stream of XCOM Chimera Squad. I know there's a few other ones, Christopher Odd, and I'm forgetting a few of the other big name ones. But like for them, they have really catered their audience around strategy games, XCOM style games, very analytical titles. So that if they give their, seal of approval, their thumbs up, that's going to carry so much more weight than if, like, PewDiePie plays XCOM, for instance, or Darkest Dungeon. Like, again, as you said, Shaw, I think, like, on the number of eyes playing that, it's going to help, but his name is not going to carry that much in terms of, if I'm a strategy fan, who am I going to trust to tell me if the new XCOM is good?
Yeah.
I think there's an observation in that, too, because I've watched a lot of these people. I watch Let's Plays videos almost daily as part of like my routine and research and stuff. And I've noticed that like the games that do better almost across the board, and there are exceptions obviously to everything, but I've started to realize the games that tend to do better sales wise, at least estimating from the reviews on Steam, are the games that these people play more than once. Like there's some of these people that they do a new indie game every day and that's cool, but then there's that one game where they play over and over again. And like the recent one is the Mega Man Battle Network game.
I have it on my Steam list.
Yeah, it's what's it called?
It's a weird name.
It was a weird name, I remember. But that game, I've seen like some of these big YouTubers. They have like 20-part series on that game. Like they play a bunch of different games, but they're playing that game 20 times. Yeah. So they've got the same amount of views times 20 for that. Like the exposure is just exponentially higher because of the way that the game is designed. Forager was the same way. It's just it's got a design that is really well suited to multiple play sessions, especially for like stream too. And I think we're seeing the rise of like these streamer friendly, YouTube friendly games that work better for content creation, so they get covered more, which is the primary engine for traffic these days.
Yeah, I think
that's the way you definitely leverage it.
Yeah, I think what you said is right, Tim. Like you don't have to have a game with endless playability, but you need, ideally you need a game that a YouTuber is going to stick with and make a series out of. If it's a 10-hour game, I mean they could easily make 20, 30, 40 videos out of that, and that is phenomenal kind of thing. If it's an hour game, but it has or 30-minute game, but it has so much replayability that they want to go through and play it over and over and over again, to get to that 10-hour point, or maybe 2,000 hours, whatever it is, getting that one video is good, but getting a whole series of videos out of that one creator is amazing.
Well, I think at this point, though, we could try to draw this back to some of the basics of marketing, right? Every time you have a viewer watching a stream, that's like gaining an impression. And you think about these influencers, there's no special magic. They're basically handing off your message to another set of users. And the way they do it, they can do a better job. The users might be more inclined, but your game still needs to sell itself. And part of what happens with those long, multiple sessions of play is that the person playing it's having a good time. And as a result, you pulled off something that someone can get sucked into in front of an audience of theirs, and now the audience looks at this person getting legitimately or earnestly sucked into the game and playing it over and over and over again. That's a damn good sales pitch.
It is. It is.
Well, sometimes what happens is the YouTuber goes to the audience and asks them if they're sucked in, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like I've seen so many YouTubers be like, "Here's a new game for the channel. Do you guys want to see more?" And if the YouTube comments say, "Hey, we want to see more," then they'll do more of them, and they'll keep on doing it as long as the comments keep on feeding it. But then once the comments come down, they'll come down too.
Yeah, there's only diminishing returns, I think. Like for some of these long, I know Northern Line, he's been playing Binding of Isaac. Like he has like several thousand, maybe like tens of thousands of plays of Binding of Isaac on his channel now, and I just don't know. Like if it's still as impactful in terms of marketing. Because I think that's another point that we haven't really talked about yet, that we could easily, who knows how long we could spend on that. Like, one of the things about video games, there is that point where everyone who's bought your game is going to buy your game. Like, even the most popular game, there is a limit in terms of how much money that game can reasonably make.
Yeah. I think we need to go to a speed round on questions. Or we're not going to get done with this.
Yeah, we'll be here for like another 3-4 hours easily. Let's see if we can try to keep some of these other questions within like an hour. We'll see what happens. I gotta scroll back up. We've been talking so much. We did.
So Deagle has a question.
Yeah.
What's your production timeline? Would you like to make games every month, every 3 months, and so on, or so forth?
Yeah, and that's, I think, a tough one, because as we've said, like, there's definitely that line of, if you spend too little time on a game, it's always going to come out looking very low budget. Like, even if you dedicate like yourself to it, again, like for Tim, Shark, and Jack, like for like when we look at games that people have submitted or students, we can see sometimes where like time spent on that game can really factor in. Shark and I were working on this idea of a kind of a beginner's guide to game development video series, and we have seen so many first-time games that even if this person spent like a year, 2-3 years on it, it looks like something someone made in like 2 months. Like, that's like the level of quality. But then, as we've spoken, spending 8, 10, 15 years on a single game doesn't work as well.
Yeah.
More time does not equal better product.
Yeah.
It just doesn't.
My students, they take about 3 months to get a good solid prototype with one level going, and then they take another 3 months to get like 2 or 3 more levels, which is about like an hour of gameplay. So I would say, you're not going to get 10 hours of gameplay in 6 months. You're going to get a couple hours of gameplay, I think, in 6 months generally, at least from my perspective. And at SCAD, I've seen 140 games made over my 10 years being there. So, I've seen, and generally they can get a good solid game made in about 3 months, but less than that, you're not going to see anything that's worth a damn, at least from my perspective.
What
I
I'm
think a play
trying
like
to
that.
do... Go ahead, Tomo.
I was going to say, you can't make a play like that unless you have some accelerated access to users, and they can somehow just eat your games up. Catch App kind of started off that way a little bit, and it's probably much more doable on mobile than it is like on PC.
Yeah,
that's a fantastic point, because I was going to say, what I'm currently in a 3-month experiment, right? Can I make a commercial Steam game 3 months be profitable? Yes or no? And that's going to be a binary yes or no. Like, either I make more than my burn or I don't. And one of the things that I'm leveraging that I guess I skip over when I talk about that is I have an existing audience. I have access to unlimited people to test the game in all time. I have analytics in all of my games. The 3-month project starts after I have a fully working game that I'm confident in the design, and when I've went over the analytics of the design, and this design specifically has higher play time than all of my other games. Mm-hmm. So like it is an analytical decision, right? Because I'm looking at all the analytics of my game. I'm saying, okay, this is the one that has the highest play time. I'm also saying I have insane amounts, the ability for like insane iteration cycles because of how many people I have to test it constantly. So, and then I also have, I think my skill set is much better at building smaller games faster than it is at building larger games. So you put all that together, I feel like I'm somewhat qualified to pull off this experiment if it can be done. But I think all of those things are important, right? Mm-hmm. Like making a game in 3 months in a vacuum is hard. Making a game in 3 months without having a core design is hard. Making a game, even the game design itself, I don't know if you guys seen the game, but it's got a lot of elements that are reusable. Like, for example, the character, it's a squad-based, turn-based tactics game, but you can capture all of the enemies to be part of your team. So it's like Pokemon in that way. So that means every time I add an enemy, I'm adding a playable character. I'm adding an unlockable character. I'm maximizing like the time spent versus there's a lot of little things that go into it. Basically saying, I have a philosophy that you can make profitable games by reducing scope instead of increasing sales, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Hard to do, though. Hard to do. It's hard to know sometimes what to cut. It's hard to know what to cut sometimes.
For
Yeah, and
for sure.
And I think that's another very important point, is that the amount of time you spend on a game is also really dependent on your own knowledge and skill level.
Yeah.
As we spoke about earlier, what you don't know can very much kill you in this industry. Spending 3 to 5 months on a game with 15, 20 years of experience in the industry in your pocket is very different than spending 3 to 5 months working on a game as your very first game.
Yes.
Yeah. So for my answer to that is, in general, and keep in mind this is general, there's exceptions on both sides, but in general, I say 1 to 3 years, because the analogy I would have is like you're baking a cake. If you don't put it in the oven long enough, it's not going to bake fully, and you're going to have a half-baked game that feels very incomplete and not do well because of that. On the other hand, if you leave it in the oven too long, it's going to burn, and you're going to have less results because you left it in there too long. Oftentimes too long is due to mismanagement. Jack here has a game that's going for 6 years, and he's doing it in a way that is sustainable, kind of thing, and he's one of those exceptions that falls outside of that. Tim here is trying to be one of the exceptions in the less than year kind of thing. But I think in general, 1 to 3 years is kind of that ideal kind of time frame kind of thing. But again, 1 to 3 years in different people's skill levels matters the world, because we've seen people, new quote unquote new indies that have been doing this for supposedly 18 years on a single game that submits a RPG Maker game that has basically nothing to it but the default RPG Maker stuff, and somehow that took them 18 years. But the skill level definitely matters in that time frame, and whether you're doing it full time or part time as a side gig also matters, because 1 year of full time may be the equivalent to 5 years in part time. It really depends, but in general, 1 to 3 years tends to be that sweet spot kind of thing.
Yeah. And again, go ahead.
I was just saying, if we're going to get back to some of the basic math of budget, then what you end up doing is you devise a thing. You go, I got this idea for a game, and I think this game will make these people happy, and there's not a lot of these people. So this game would have to be, I can sell it to 12,000 people, and that means if I charge $8 for it, I can get this much money. So let's say I had to spend that amount of money to make this game. Can I do it? And you'll often find that no, you can't. And that can quickly, if you go through that exercise many times, and by trying to devise games that are both relatively large as well as games that are extraordinarily simple, you really start to get a feel for why certain games get made. You'll also start making sense of all these interesting niches in the Steam universe. That's why there are these little games that service this little need for users, and this other thing, these games are a little bit bigger because that's what they want, but there's enough of them to make it worth it. I think that there's so much potential variability in the math of it. You really have to be putting your eyes as close to the situation as possible to figure it out.
The truth is, there's no real answer to this one.
Exactly.
Took 2 hours to tell you there's no right answer.
Yeah, there we go. We did it.
To any of this.
But
that exercise can help, right? Create a design. Imagine how much it will cost you, and then figure out, this isn't a good design because there isn't enough of an audience to make it worth making.
Yeah, and to give a very interesting point about all this, if you remember the game Manifold Garden that came out last year by artist William Cheer, he spent I think 7-8 years on that game, going part-time, full-time, changing the idea, redoing it, streaming his development to make that one game. And then again, like Shark, here's my like game of the stream. I always talk about Vision Soft Reset. That Mark made that game in I think like a year or two, maybe even a little bit less than that. And it was a solid Metroidvania game. It was his first Metroidvania, and like it was like one of those examples where when I spoke to him, I was like shocked, genuinely shocked that he said, "Oh, this is my first game." I was like, "You made this as your first game, and it was this well refined?" And
it wasn't his first game. It was his first Metroidvania. I think it was like his second or third game.
Okay, but like
look at Counter Strike and Goose. That was his first game, and look how good that was.
Yeah, and like we said, like experience can mean so much when it comes to making these games. Like again, I keep always going back to Darkest Dungeon, but they had, I think between the two of them, Chris and Tyler had, I think, like several decades of experience making games combined before they made Darkest Dungeon. They knew how to make a game before they got together to work on Darkest Dungeon. And again, it shows when you see like that level of polish there.
I don't know if this is helpful for everyone to hear, but it does turn out that if you know what you're doing, you can eliminate a fair amount of risk.
Yeah.
And
do we want to go on to the next question?
Sure. And one thing that I wanted to bring up just very quickly, and then we'll go on the next one before I forget this again. Like another thing I think you can't discount, this is something we've said about like the dream idea or that passion, is that the consumer can definitely sense when you're passionate about a game. And it's something that we've seen a lot from the games that we've been spotlighting, that there are some amazing concepts coming from first-time and smaller developers that you can tell that they were putting 100% into this game. Just as you can tell when a developer is not firing on all cylinders. Again, like for myself and Tim, like I mean, we both have seen games that look very much like rip-offs or very low-quality games, the quote-unquote asset flips, things like that. And when you see that game that you know that developer put 100% into it, it can sometimes smooth out rough patches with that design.
I don't know. It didn't help No Man's Sky that much.
Well, most of
the businesses, they made
finally
a lot
got
of
it
money.
out. Yeah, he finally got it out.
All right.
So the next question we have is how much have you all looked at selling your tools that you made in the Unity Asset Store?
We've thought about it here and there.
I don't work on Unity.
I don't know if it's relevant anymore because this was years ago, but I did get my start by selling a tool. There was an engine called FPS Creator, and I sold a tool that allowed you to get your assets or guns or whatever into the engine. I made quite a bit of money with that. I made almost 6 figures with that, and it was just some random thing that I decided to make one day, and it funded me for several years. So
I have a student who made a skybox for Unreal, and he sells $2,000 a month just for that one skybox. So you definitely can make money if you do a good asset.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got the right stuff and it's very useful, like the best way to find this stuff is to find, oh, I really wish there was a tool to do this. Like if you do it 1,000 times and like it's a pain in the ass, and you know how you can like fix that process or make it faster or easier. Same thing like with startups, just solving a problem, right?
Yeah.
Make sure it's a tool somebody wants. It's not a tool to do the same things that there are better tools to do, the same problem. You can. I know people that have made quite a bit of money selling tools, and I think it's a viable option for sure.
Yeah, for myself, really haven't had that opportunity because our last game, we built a custom engine. There's not really a market for that, and our current one, we're just now kind of restarting on the programming, moving from a different custom engine to a Unity, and we don't have any custom tools yet. So but I have been thinking about, after somebody suggested this, maybe making a UI art pack, because people seem to really love my UIs that I've done. So maybe I might make a UI art pack and put it on the Unity store or whatever store, maybe all the stores.
As a very interesting point, I know Stardock Entertainment, I think, got their start making like tools and software for people, and then they used the money they earned from that to kind of fund their first games, if I remember the story right.
It's awesome, and their games are good.
Let's see. Carlos asked, "What about working with teams for free, and working on games you want to work on, even though you know it's not going to be financially successful? How do you pivot a project to be more sustainable?" I think those may be two separate questions there.
For the sustainable part is, if it's for free, then sustainable is indicative of people working on it who don't have to work. And then it's sustainable as long as they can keep working without pay.
As long as the game gets finished.
Well, and
it also depends. You may have infrastructure payments like server structure or Google Drive and tools and stuff like that. There may be money that's you have to pay even if people are working for free or working for equity or whatever it is.
So inevitably, you wouldn't make that game, right? If you have no funds whatsoever, then you have the goodwill of the people working on it and the constraint that you can't do things that cost money. How sustainable is that? It's a tricky question because it's not clear. It's a little bit difficult for that, to get places with a group like that. That's not to say that it's not possible, because it happens. But it's a tough situation to be in if you really want to get to results in a reasonable time frame.
It's rare when that happens all the way to completion.
Yeah. Like we were saying in chat about Dwarf Fortress being an example of that game until it wasn't. That the two brawlers were on that game for, I think, like 10, 15 years at this point, and then one of them suffered some kind of medical issue, and they needed more money, so they basically took a publishing rights with Kid Fox Games to help the game get more sales. But I mean, if they didn't have that issue, like, they could be working on the game the same way for, who knows, maybe another 15, 20 years.
To be fair, they should have got on Steam before. I don't know. Do they hate money?
Yeah.
Do you hate money? That's another good phrase for this.
I mean, I don't understand.
They have a pretty solid Patreon too, don't they?
Yeah, and they have lots of support. I mean, their work is extremely good.
Well, they might be making more on Patreon than they could on Steam.
Well, they're gonna get. I'm gonna buy it on Steam for sure. It already came out.
Everybody's heard of that game too.
Yeah,
like one of those games
love it.
Heard of.
Yeah, because like you sell your game on Steam for $15 one time, or make $5 a month forever, from Patreon kind of thing.
Yeah, but they might get 1 million people to buy it for a few bucks on Steam. 1 million people that don't even know what Patreon is.
I think that's another very weird thing. There's a topic right there about kind of the knowledge level of the consumer.
Getting the word out is huge.
Yeah. Like, I'm sure there are still people out there who have no idea what Steam is, or who probably, only know Fortnite as that thing kids dance to. Like, there's an actual game there?
Yeah, it surprises me when I find a kid that doesn't know what Steam is. Because I found one of my friends, had no idea what Steam was. I was like, how?
North America's console culture, though.
I love, when we were still able to go outside, I did a presentation at, a little library, and this, family, father, daughter, and son came. I'm like, so has anyone here heard of Darkest Dungeon? And the little girl goes, yeah, I heard of it, I played it. I'm like, oh, you played this M-rated game. Okay, then. Yeah, I know all about it. I watched people and I played a little bit of it. Okay, you go. Let's see.
So, next question we got on is, what is our opinions on remote studios?
Definitely a good idea lately.
Yes.
I've been we've been remote the whole time. I've got people on my team I've never met in person that I've been working with for years. And with stuff like Slack and with stuff like Discord, it is very doable nowadays and Perforce. So, and I believe for a lot of people, it's the best way to do it because you don't have to have the infrastructure of a brick and mortar office and healthcare and all that stuff. And it definitely gives you more options than if you're trying to make a traditional game studio.
Your studio would have to be in a very limited number of places if you want everyone to be at the office. I think remote is just the new normal.
Yeah. The rest of the world.
I myself, we've been remote this entire time, and the plans, my original plans were we were going to hopefully make enough money from our first game and be able to get a studio from that, and then all move together. And then after we got far enough along, it's like, that's probably not a good idea. I think I like working remote better.
Yeah.
The only thing when you have a studio, it's easier to pick up a publisher because a lot of times publishers won't. They'll do due diligence, and their due diligence, a lot of red flags will go off if you don't have a studio. I know everybody's doing it from home. It'll be way harder to get a publisher when you're doing remote. We've seen that problem.
Oh yeah, we definitely have an office and all of that. It's hard not. I mean, it's a cost, and it does block maybe some of the real low cost or low expenditure situations, but it is still valuable to have an actual location. And then sometimes because of dev kits and stuff, it's a little bit easier to actually have some place. So we're in Southern California though, so it's a little bit easier for us to pick up bodies.
I just wonder if the coronavirus is going to have any kind of long-term effects of shifting this particular topic to where publishers don't mind, remote studios, and like studios are now going more remote kind of thing.
Well,
after
everybody's remote now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, like after this ends.
Yeah.
I mean,
They'll be more comfortable with it.
Yeah, Blizzard is remote now.
Some companies are going to look straight at the numbers and they're going to see a bump in productivity, and they're going to be like, well, it doesn't make sense for us to send everybody back to the office now because we made more money not doing that.
Yeah.
This is
I think it's a good
totally
test.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then people
Before
go
they
to
were
the
like, no, it's not going to work, but now.
I don't know. I think you definitely get more productivity if you have everybody in the same place than if you're
It depends on the
leaving
type of
them
work, though.
to
I
their
think.
own desserts.
Yeah, and to Arcor's point in chat, yeah, like you need. Oh wait, was he the one who said? Yeah, a remote. Yeah, you have to kind of get used to. You have to kind of like get back into that swing. Like again, like I still struggle with that sometimes. Like you have to balance the fact that hey, I can go watch TV whenever I want, or I can go have lunch whenever I want, with the fact that hey, I still have work to do during the day. Like you still have to be really good at multitasking and kind of be able to set a schedule for yourself.
Some people
I
work
find
really
it much
well.
easier to work when I have a place to go that's away from my house.
Mm.
I am
Yeah.
struggling because as a teacher now, we've moved to all remote for the last quarter, and for me, the motivation factor gets a lot harder when
Yeah.
I'm not getting up and getting dressed and putting my suit on and going and teaching, as opposed to like just rolling in here and throwing my headphone on.
I think the big thing, like for me, I think you guys can agree with this, is that when you go to some place, you're dedicating like that chunk of time that that I'm going to be there. Got someone sneezing in the other room. You're going to be going there for 2, 4, 6 hours, whatever, 8 hours, and I'm going to be focused this chunk of time. This is what I'm going to do, and then when I leave, the switch gets flipped off. I'm doing something else. But when you're working remotely or you're working from home, you don't really have that. Like it's hard to kind of say to yourself, I'm only going to spend 3 hours doing this or 2 hours doing that. Yeah. I think we're actually past our time here. Let's go through. Let's see, Shark. So let's see if we can do a lightning round of these questions, and then I think that will take us to the end because we can easily jump into 2, 3, 4 more hours of topics. Like this is not a 2-hour long solution. We're not solving this in 2 hours.
So the next question we got is, what's our opinion on the Netflix of games business model?
You mean like Stadia?
Yeah, Stadia and like anything similar to that.
The Xbox Games Pass.
Something that doesn't exist yet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all about it. I wasn't before. As a developer, I'm a little hesitant. I think somebody's going to do it, and it's going to work better than all the other people that have done it, and that's going to be the Netflix. But I don't think we've really seen that. I think Game Pass probably has the best.
Well, I mean, Gamefly's been doing this for years, haven't they?
Yeah.
And the only problem I see with like Stadia and other stuff like that is like the people they're pulling in to do work on those games. No offense if they're listening, but they don't seem like they're all going for mass market style games, and I think Netflix really made its name by coming up with really unique and cool content that was, that stood out as opposed to just, slurping stuff on there. I mean, you look at Disney Plus, The Mandalorian is what is pulling everybody in, not the Donald Duck cartoons, right? So it's like, but it seems like the people they're pulling into at Google, because frankly, I just don't think they know a lot about what makes games work. They're just they're working off a formula. I think as long as they're doing that, they're not going to make it. I think if you're not taking chances, you're not putting outstanding. HBO made Game of Thrones, right? They didn't make a bunch of crap to take over the top. They made the killer programming that they put the best people on. They didn't just roll out Survivor season 8. So, I think you've got to have visionaries to make it work. And frankly, I'm not seeing visionaries work at these companies yet. That's the way I see. So I think it's a ways off.
I think it's going to take something that nobody else has done yet in that space, because everyone's been trying to do the same kind of thing, and it just doesn't seem like it's either too restrictive for the consumer, or there's just no money in it for the developer. The one thing that I see a lot of them promote is the idea of you'll get money, I think like X amount of money per minutes played of your game, and that just seems like it's
a bad deal.
Yeah.
The business model usually and historically is dictated kind of the art form, though, right? So if something like Stadia does take off and the developers make more money with playtime, we're going to see games that are designed to increase playtime. It's kind of like the in-app purchases
mobile games.
thing. Now we see games that are incentivizing different things, and it just kind of changes. I don't necessarily think it's good or bad. I mean the in-app purchase is a whole nother, the loot box discussion, but I just think it's an evolution. I think somebody's going to do it right. It's a matter of time. It's got to happen. I think all these companies are pushing for it.
How long we've been waiting for somebody to make the killer VR game that still hasn't taken off, though, right? And
is Alex coming close though?
Is
I've
it?
heard people say. I don't know.
I
don't have VR,
is.
so
Me neither.
I don't think it is. I've got the Rift S. I got the good stuff, man, but there's just not the killer game out there, sadly.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, the user numbers
But the
are
killer
improving
game
for
definitely
VR.
ships the products.
It certainly does.
All right, but I know you guys have to get going in the next few minutes, and that's the beauty of these roundtables. We'll start on topic, and then we'll end up 4 or 5 hours later talking about all manner of things. But here's the final thing for everybody. I just want to go round the table here. We'll start with Sharky and then go Tim, Jack, and Tomo this time. What would be like your final comment, your final word of wisdom, like for somebody new watching this right now who's thinking, I want to make a game, or I want to start a business making games? What would you tell that person?
Okay, so first thing I would tell them is what's a new series that you and I are about to make, which will be on my YouTube channel, your YouTube channel, because we're going to be putting all that kinds of stuff on there.
What a pitch!
There you go. He does the marketing. I'm not the marketing guy, and that's why.
But overall, I would say you need to learn and expect that you need to get realistic expectations, because I've seen so many new developers expecting to come in and I can just spend a month on this and I'll make $1 million kind of thing. It's like, no, you've got more chances of winning the lottery, $1 million in 5 minutes by going inside the ticket than you do in getting $1 million that way. I mean, it is technically possible, but so is getting hit by lightning about 20 times in a row. You don't want to go for that kind of gamble, unless you are some kind of gambling addict. Maybe you do, but you need to have realistic expectations. Realize that you are almost guaranteed to fail in your first game. Be prepared to go for the long haul. Be prepared to scope out your game to where your budget and your potential sales can kind of meet in the middle, at least somewhere. kind of thing. And, learn as much as you can before you even start. Try to, at least make a few game jam games before jumping into it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
All right.
If I were to sum up my points on it, I would probably say that just a lot of people, they think the product is the business, and this happens in business too. But I think you've got to look at business as something that you want to learn. If you want to build a successful business in any field, not just game dev, you got to learn, and the way that you learn is iteration cycles, right? You try a thing, you see result. Did it work? Yes, no. If yes, keep doing. If no, stop. Try something else. And I think the best way to learn quickly is to shorten those iteration cycles. Make them as low risk and as fast as possible so that you can build knowledge, you can build a business. And I think if you want to build a business, especially in something like games, it's going to take a lot of games. I don't think it's reliable to think that you're gonna build an entire business on one game. I could be wrong about that. This is just based on like my philosophy, But I think at the very least it takes experience on other people's things, right? To however you can get that experience, or however you can shorten those iteration cycles to make sure that you learn what you need to learn to be successful in business.
All right.
Let's see. I would say making a game is an art form, and if you're trying to make art to make money, you're never going to make it. So do it for the art itself. If you're trying to trying to learn guitar and you play guitar, don't think you're going to be a rock star or you're going to be able to pay yourself when you play guitar, because you won't. If you're an artist, don't think you're going to be able to pay yourself because you decide you want to do art. Have fun with it. And you'll find that if you have fun with it, and somehow you join with other likely people, and they have fun with it, you might surprise yourself and actually be successful at it. But don't go into it expecting to make money. Go into it for the journey, and go into it to have fun. And then you might be pleasantly surprised when you see that Steam had 8,000 games last year. You're going to get lost in the shuffle no matter what you do. So you might as well not torture yourself and beat yourself up if you don't make money on the first thing. But if you get a bunch of people and you're basically like in a band, and your band likes making music, you might not necessarily be the Beatles, but eventually you'll come out with something that sells.
So, if we think about games and business together, there's the game making part, and I think there's a lot of talking about the game making part. We can get a lot of information about that, and we know that it is at its core a fundamentally creative endeavor. And to become very good at that, the better you are at that, the more likely your business can succeed. However, if you neglect the business side of things, there's much difficulty and obstacle that you'll be running into, and unfortunately, the business skills are sort of the opposite. When it comes to the art of creating games, you go deep, and you commit a great deal of human energy to create subtlety and nuance and try to understand how people work better, or how to make them, how to engage them, and how to keep them interested in what you're doing. Whereas on the business side of things, it's, hey, there are all these things you don't know anything about, and you have to figure them out real quick, and you can't screw them up, right? On one side, it's deep and the better, and on the other side, it's all these small scale to medium scale requirements that you need to fulfill. And so I think that big part of it might just be navigating the kind of dichotomy of those two approaches.
Yeah, team up with a good business person.
That's another fine approach. Is like to have someone specialize on the one thing so that someone else can specialize on the other thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And again, I think everyone has put it better than I could. There is so many skills that go into this that, as we've said over the course of almost 2.5 hours of talking, we barely scratched the surface. I mean, we could sit here and spend 3-4 more hours, just barely getting maybe 5-10% on this topic. And like we've said, it is about experience. It's about being able to understand that there's so much that goes into this beyond just making a game. And I mean, even with that one sentence, that's another 30-minute discussion. As we've said, as Tim said at the start, you put on many different hats when you become a game developer. And just because you are the most amazing game designer doesn't mean anything if you can't market your game, or if you are the best programmer but you can't create an interesting idea to save your life, you're not going to be able to do much. And even with that, like, as we've said, you can have everything be perfect and your game still fails. And failure can mean different things for different people. For somebody, getting 100 people to play your game and buy it is like saying, my game's like Call of Duty. That's how successful it was to me. To somebody else, getting 500 or 1,000 copies sold is nothing. You're going under because you spend too much time on that. And so much of this is just the very fact that there is no one size fits all. I think that's kind of like our mantra, or our mission statement for this cast.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Have fun talking to you, lovely people.
Yep, it was.
Of course.
This was Jack's first time. How'd you like hanging out with us, ranting about game design for almost 2.5 hours?
Invite me back. I'll come back. You guys are great. It's fun.
All right, so here's the final thing then. I was going to give each of you a chance to mention your social media, plugs, anything like that. So we'll start. I guess I'll start. We'll go around the table like that. So for the new people watching, thank you so much. This is going to go up in record form pretty much the second the stream is encoded, so there will be no delays on that. You can follow me on Twitter at GWBeister. We have our Discord and Patreon link down below, as well as my 2 books on game design, 20 Essential Games to Study and Game Design Deep Dive Platformers. And if you are a developer working on a game and you'd like me to take a look at it or come on Talk Design, please get in touch. I am always looking for new connections.
My name is Tomo Moriwaki. I work at Hyperkinetic Studios. We have a game on Steam Early Access called Epic Tavern, and we're on our big push this year to get it out to full release. Patch will be coming out soon, and you can easily find us at discord.gg/Epic Tavern and have lots and lots of conversations about the game design, game development.
That is so pro. Well, I work at Savannah College of Art and Design, SCAD. So if you want to get into the business, you have no idea, come to my school because it's a good school and we're good. But I'm also working on a game. You can find all about it. It's called In the Black, and it's at www.impellerstudios.com, and you'll get all the information there about it.
I'm a dude that makes video games on the internet. You can follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/Tim Ruswick, or I YouTube Game Dev Underground. Just search that, or on Twitch 2 days a week, twitch.tv/Tim Ruswick, and we make games live and share our thoughts on the industry.
Cool.
I'm Sharky Shark, otherwise known as Jim Tankersley. I run Nexus Games, and making a game right now, Project Triad. Intending, like I said earlier, going to be doing a YouTube series for beginner devs with Josh and I, which will be on my YouTube channel as well as his, and which will both be different versions. And the main place you can find me is on Discord, which sadly I don't have a custom Discord link, so you'll have to get that from the description of the video, which is not sadly in the live version. You'll have to get that in the recorded version. Or you can just PM me on Josh's Discord if you're on his Discord and get my link there. We can also do. We have our YouTube channel, which will also be in the description. Or you could, message me on Josh's Discord.
All right. Well, gentlemen, this has been a very great cast and another, I think, really amazing roundtable here. Jack, again, thank you for coming on for the first time. And for those of you watching, we're going to try to shoot for doing these at least once a month. And I am planning on trying to do some genre-themed roundtables in the future, such as adventure game, roguelike, etc., etc. But I will maybe be back later on. You do a lot of wrestling if I want to do a game stream tonight. But come back regularly for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where it's in the art and science of games. Have a great rest of your night, and take care.
Bye, guys. Thanks for having us. Or me.
See ya.